The moment Kavya stood up, the hall was filled with a quiet buzz. People were talking softly, waiting for the function to begin. It was a special evening, one where families and guests had gathered to celebrate success, hard work, and the journey of people who had overcome challenges. Sundar sat in the front row with his mother, Lakshmi, by his side. Both of them had calm smiles, but inside they felt curious. Tonight was not just about them. It was about a younger voice, a voice that was about to change the mood of the entire hall. Kavya was nervous as she stood behind the curtain. She could hear the whispers, the claps, and the sound of people taking their seats. Her palms were sweating, and for a moment she thought about stepping back. She was young. She was not a big leader. She was not famous like her father or respected like her grandmother. She was just Kavya. But something inside her kept telling her that today she could not stay silent. Today she had to speak. When her name was called, the lights brightened on stage. She walked forward slowly. Her heart was racing, but her steps were steady. The hall fell silent as she reached the microphone. People were expecting a simple thank you or maybe a short speech. But the way she looked at the audience made everyone feel that something different was about to happen. Kavya took a deep breath. Her voice shook at first, but then it grew firm. She said, "Many of you know me as Sundar's daughter or Lakshmi's granddaughter. But today, I do not want to stand here only as someone's family. I want to speak as myself. I want to speak about what I have seen, what I have felt, and what I believe is important for all of us." The audience leaned forward. Even Sundar lifted his head with surprise. Lakshmi adjusted her glasses, her eyes fixed on Kavya. Kavya continued, "People often say children must stay quiet at functions, that they do not know the world enough to speak. But I have learned that silence can hurt more than mistakes. When we do not speak about what matters, we lose the chance to bring change. And I cannot stay silent anymore." The hall grew tense. People exchanged looks. Some wondered what she was about to reveal. Sundar's hands tightened around the edge of his chair. Lakshmi's expression was unreadable, but her eyes were shining with a mix of concern and curiosity. Kavya then shared a story. "Last year I saw a friend being mocked in school because she spoke in a simple accent. She cried silently and told me she wished she could disappear. I could have stayed quiet. I could have just walked away. But I stood beside her and said, 'You do not need to change. They need to learn respect.' That moment taught me that kindness is not about being soft. Kindness is about being brave." The audience was moved. Whispers began to spread again, but now they were filled with respect. People were not expecting such strength from her. Kavya's voice grew even stronger. "We all celebrate achievements, positions, and awards. But what about respect? What about the way we treat the person sitting next to us? The worker who serves us food, the guard who opens the gate, the student who struggles in class. Real greatness is not measured by how high you climb. It is measured by how many hands you hold while climbing." Lakshmi blinked quickly, her heart pounding. She had always told Sundar about the power of kindness when he was young. Now she was hearing the same lesson from her granddaughter. Sundar leaned back, surprised. He had faced many tough moments in his life, but hearing Kavya speak so fearlessly made him realize something. His daughter was not afraid of judgment. She was not afraid of being misunderstood. She was showing courage in front of hundreds of people. Then Kavya paused, letting her words sink in. She looked directly at Sundar and Lakshmi. "You both have taught me many lessons through your actions. You showed me how humility can open doors that pride never can. Today, I want to remind everyone here, including myself, that humility is not weakness. It is the strength to bow when the world tells you to stand tall only for yourself. It is the strength to see others as equal." The hall was completely silent now. No phones were buzzing, no chairs were moving. Everyone was caught inside her words. But suddenly, a man in the back row raised his voice. "Why should we listen to a child? What does she know about real struggle, about pain, about responsibility?" His words were sharp, and for a moment the silence broke into murmurs. Kavya did not flinch. She looked at him directly and replied, "You're right. I have not lived as long as you. I have not faced what you faced. But I have seen enough to know that pain does not belong only to age. A child can feel pain. A child can see injustice. And sometimes, it is the youngest voice that speaks the truth adults forget to say. The man lowered his eyes. The hall clapped softly, then louder. Sundar and Lakshmi exchanged glances. They had expected a simple evening. Instead, they were watching Kavya transform into something unexpected. The story of that night had only just begun, and no one in the hall knew how much more Kavya's fearless words would change them. The question that silenced the hall, after Kavya's bold reply, the claps grew louder. Some people stood up to cheer, others smiled with pride, and many simply sat in silence, letting the words echo inside their hearts. Sundar looked down for a moment, hiding the small smile forming on his face. Lakshmi folded her hands tightly, her heart trembling with both fear and joy. Kavya had not planned this. She had not written down her speech. Every word came from a place deep inside her, a place filled with memories and emotions she could no longer keep hidden. She stepped closer to the microphone and said softly, "Many of you may think I am speaking only to impress. But I am not here to impress. I am here to ask a question that even I struggle with." The hall leaned in again. People felt something heavy was coming. Kavya continued, "Why do we celebrate respect only in speeches, but forget it in our actions? We speak about kindness when the lights are on us, but when no one is watching, how do we really treat people?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Nobody moved. The brightness of the stage lights only made the silence sharper. In the front row, an older woman whispered to her friend, "She is right. Even I sometimes forget to speak gently to the helpers at home." Her words spread quietly from row to row until the whole hall was filled with self-reflection. Kavya looked down for a moment. She remembered something that made her throat tighten. She raised her eyes again and shared, "I once saw my grandmother Lakshmi scold a worker in anger, but later that night I saw her sit with the same worker, hold her hand, and say, 'Sorry.' I asked her why she did that. She told me, 'Because I am human, and humans make mistakes. But greatness is not in never failing. It is in standing up after falling and correcting the wrong we do.'" I never forgot those words. Lakshmi's eyes filled with tears. She had almost forgotten that small incident. She had not realized how deeply it had touched Kavya. The audience clapped again, but Kavya raised her hand gently to quiet them. "Clapping is easy," she said softly. "Living those words every day is hard." The weight of her honesty was so heavy that many people looked down, ashamed. Sundar felt a strange mix of emotions. He was proud but also unsettled. His daughter was not just speaking to the hall, she was speaking to him too. He had been so busy with his work, with leading teams, with building things, that sometimes he had forgotten to give time to the small acts of kindness that mattered at home. Then something unexpected happened. A boy from the audience stood up. His voice shook, but he spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Kavya, how do you stay strong when people laugh at you or try to break your courage?" "Because I feel weak every time it happens to me." The hall froze again. This was not a planned function anymore. This was turning into something raw, something real. Kavya looked at him with steady eyes. "I feel weak too," she admitted. "I cry when no one sees me. But then I remember that strength is not the absence of fear. Strength is when you walk forward even with fear in your chest. If people laugh, let them laugh. If they try to break you, let them try. Because what you carry inside cannot be stolen unless you give it away." The boy sat down slowly, wiping his eyes. The hall was completely quiet. Every person was waiting for her next words. Kavya then said, "I know I am young. I know I still have much to learn. But tonight I wanted to stand here not as a child, not as a daughter, not as a granddaughter. I wanted to stand here as a reminder. Respect, humility, and kindness are not just values for books or speeches. They are shields that protect us, and they are bridges that connect us." The claps returned, louder and stronger. But Sundar was no longer clapping. He was staring at his daughter with a deep frown. not of anger but of realization. She had spoken truths even he had avoided, truths that could not be ignored anymore. Lakshmi placed her hand gently on Sundar's arm. "She has your courage," she whispered. "But she has her own fire, too." Sundar nodded slowly. He was proud, but he was also troubled. He knew that fearless voices often face resistance, and he feared that the world outside this hall would not be kind to Kavya's bravery. Kavya smiled softly at the audience, but inside, her heart was heavy too. She knew this was only the beginning, and she could already sense that her words would stir not just respect, but also challenge. The storm begins. The claps faded slowly, but the echo of Kavya's words stayed in the hall like a shadow that refused to leave. People were whispering among themselves, some praising her courage, others questioning her boldness. Sundar's face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Lakshmi sat still, holding her shawl tightly as if bracing for something. Behind the stage, a few organizers looked worried. One of them whispered, "This is not what we planned. She is going off track." Another replied, "But look at the people. They are listening. Maybe this is what they needed." Kavya stepped back from the microphone, ready to end her speech, but the audience did not let her leave. Voices rose, asking questions, seeking answers. One man stood up. His tone was sharp, almost accusing. "You talk about respect and kindness, but do you know the pressure of feeding a family? Do you know how it feels to sacrifice dreams just to survive? Words are easy, child. Life is not." The hall became tense again. Some nodded in agreement, others waited for her reply. Sundar leaned forward slightly. Lakshmi's lips pressed into a thin line. Kavya took a deep breath. Her voice was steady but soft. "Sir, you are right. I have not lived your life. I do not know your pain, but I have seen sacrifice too. I have seen my father work night and day, far away from us, missing birthdays and festivals, just so he could build a future. I have seen my grandmother sit alone sometimes, her eyes heavy with memories she never shares. I may not carry your struggles, but I carry mine. Pain does not come in one shape. Every heart carries its own weight." The man sat down slowly. His anger had no answer left. The hall clapped again, but this time the claps were slower, heavier, filled with respect. Lakshmi wiped a tear quietly. Sundar closed his eyes for a moment, remembering his own journey. The long nights, the failures, the doubts. He had walked a hard road, and now he was watching his daughter stand tall at an age when he himself had been filled with fear. But as the applause echoed, another sound cut through the hall. It was not clapping. It was laughter. A group of young boys sitting near the side row were chuckling. One of them said loudly, "She thinks she is some kind of leader. She's just a kid acting big." The words hit the air like a knife. The audience turned their heads. Sundar's jaw tightened. Lakshmi's hand trembled. Everyone waited to see how Kavya would react. She looked at the boys, her eyes calm but piercing. She walked 2 steps closer to the edge of the stage and spoke directly to them. "You are right," she said softly. "I'm just a kid, but sometimes even a kid can remind the world of the truth adults forget. If you think my voice is small, then let it be small. But even a small voice can light a fire." The laughter stopped. The boys looked down, their cheeks red. The hall erupted with claps louder than before, shaking the walls. People stood on their feet. For the first time that evening, Sundar himself clapped, his hands firm, his eyes shining with pride. Lakshmi clapped too, her face glowing with both love and awe. But in the back of the hall, not everyone was happy. A man in a dark suit whispered to another, "This girl is dangerous. If she speaks like this now, imagine what she will say when she grows. She can make people question. She can make people resist." The second man nodded. Yes, such voices must be handled before they spread too far. They both left quietly, unnoticed by most. Kavya returned to the microphone. Her voice lowered, carrying the weight of everything that had just happened. "I do not know what tomorrow will bring. I do not know if people will support me or try to silence me. But I know one thing. I will not hide from truth, because if even one person feels hope after my words, then I have done enough tonight." The audience clapped again, but Sundar and Lakshmi shared a look. They both felt the same fear. Kavya had spoken with courage, but courage often came with a cost, and that cost was already walking out of the hall in the shadows. Whispers in the dark, the hall slowly emptied after the function. But the weight of Kavya's words stayed in every corner. People left in small groups, discussing what they had heard. Some praised her courage, some questioned her boldness, and some simply walked away in silence, unable to express what they felt. Sundar and Lakshmi walked beside Kavya as they left the stage. Sundar placed his hand gently on her shoulder. "You spoke with strength," he said softly. "But strength also attracts challenge. Are you ready for that?" Kavya looked up at him. Her eyes were calm but filled with fire. "I did not plan to speak, Papa. The words came because I could not stay silent. If challenge comes, I will face it. Silence is harder for me than struggle." Lakshmi smiled faintly, but her heart was heavy. She knew the world was not always kind to fearless voices. She had lived long enough to see how truth often brought enemies along with friends. Outside the hall, near the gate, the two men in dark suits who had left earlier were waiting. Their faces were hidden in the shadows. One of them spoke in a low voice. "This girl has courage that can shake minds. If her words spread, she will make people question authority." "We cannot allow that," the other nodded. "Yes, we will watch her. We will wait. The moment she crosses the line, we will make sure her voice is silenced." Their whispers were lost in the night. But destiny had already written that Kavya's path would not be easy. Back at home, Kavya sat quietly in her room. The applause still echoed in her ears, but so did the mocking voices. She remembered the boys who had laughed. She remembered the man who had challenged her. Her chest felt heavy. Lakshmi entered her room, carrying a small steel cup of warm milk. She placed it on the table and sat beside her. "You were brave today," she said. "But bravery always comes with a shadow. That shadow is fear. Do not ignore it. Face it, and you will always rise stronger." Kavya leaned against her grandmother's shoulder. "Nani, did you ever feel fear when you spoke the truth?" Lakshmi nodded slowly. "Many times. Fear never leaves, child. But courage is when you walk forward even as fear holds your hand. Tonight you walked forward. Do not forget that feeling." The words soothed Kavya, but as she closed her eyes, she did not know that outside her home, the men in dark suits were watching. Their car was parked near the corner, their eyes fixed on the light in her room. Meanwhile, Sundar sat alone in his study. His laptop was open, but his mind was elsewhere. He remembered his own struggles, the years when people doubted him, the times when his voice was ignored. He had built his life on resilience, but now he wondered if his daughter's path would be harder than his own. Suddenly, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It read, "Control your daughter. Fearless words can create enemies you cannot fight." Sundar's hand tightened on the phone. His face grew pale. He deleted the message quickly, not wanting Lakshmi or Kavya to see. But inside, he knew the warning was real. The next morning, when Kavya went to school, some classmates clapped for her and called her brave. But others mocked her, saying she wanted attention, saying she spoke only because of her father's name. The mix of praise and criticism hit her like waves crashing from two sides. During lunch break, a girl approached her quietly. Her eyes were wet. "Thank you for speaking last night," she whispered. "My father is a driver. People treat him badly, but your words made me feel proud of him. You reminded me that respect matters." Kavya's eyes softened. She held the girl's hand and said, "Never feel ashamed of honest work. Respect begins with the way we see ourselves." But even as she spoke, she noticed two boys standing at a distance, whispering and pointing at her. She knew they were mocking her again, but she forced herself to stay calm. That evening, Sundar called Kavya to the living room. His tone was serious. "Listen carefully," he said. "Your words last night were powerful, but they will not always bring applause. Sometimes they will bring silence, sometimes anger, and sometimes danger. I will not ask you to stop, but I will ask you to be careful. Kavya looked at him with steady eyes. Papa, if truth creates danger, then silence creates death inside. I cannot stop. I will not stop. Lakshmi placed her hand on Kavya's. Your fire is pure, child. But fire must be guided, or it can burn. Promise me you will walk with patience as well as courage. Kavya nodded slowly. I promise. The night passed quietly, but the quiet was only on the surface. Under that silence, storms were forming. Storms that would test Kavya, Sundar, and Lakshmi in ways they could not yet imagine. The morning sun rose softly, but inside the house the air was heavy. Sundar had barely slept. The warning message from the unknown number kept flashing in his mind. He had seen many challenges in his career, but this felt different. This was not about business or competition. This was about his daughter. Kavya, however, walked into the kitchen with calm steps. She greeted Lakshmi, who was preparing breakfast, and sat down with her notebook. She was already writing again. Her words flowed quickly, as if her heart had been waiting for this moment. Lakshmi watched her silently. She saw the fire in her granddaughter's eyes, the same fire she had once seen in Sundar when he was young. But she also saw the shadow of danger, and that made her heart restless. Later that day, Kavya went to school. At first, everything seemed normal. Teachers praised her for her courage, and some students smiled at her. But then, during class, a folded paper was passed to her desk. She opened it quietly. The note said, "Stop talking big, or you will regret it." Her fingers trembled. She looked around, but no one admitted to sending it. Some boys in the back row were laughing, and she guessed it was them. During recess, the same boys blocked her way near the staircase. One of them smirked and said, "You think you are special because you gave one speech? You are nothing without your father's name." Kavya's heart raced, but she stood straight. "I spoke with my own voice," she said. "I do not need anyone's name to tell the truth." The boys laughed louder. One of them pushed her notebook to the ground. "Truth," he mocked. "Truth is useless when the world only respects power." Kavya bent down, picked up her notebook, and replied calmly, "Power fades. Truth stays." Then she walked away, her hands shaking but her steps steady. The boys stared after her, their smirks fading slowly. They had expected her to cry or fight, but she had done neither. She had answered with dignity, and that shook them more than anger ever could. That evening, Sundar heard about the incident. His anger flared, but Kavya stopped him. "Papa, do not fight for me. Let me fight with my words. If I run away now, my voice will never matter again." Sundar looked at her silently. He wanted to protect her, but he knew she was right. Later that night, Lakshmi came to Kavya's room. She sat beside her and whispered, "Child, the first stone has been thrown. But remember, it is not the stone that decides your path. It is how you walk after it falls. Do not let small minds break your spirit." Kavya smiled faintly. "Nani, sometimes I feel fear. But when I remember your words and Papa's journey, the fear becomes smaller." But even as they spoke, the men in dark suits were meeting again in a quiet corner of the city. One of them placed photos of Kavya on the table. "She is growing bolder," he said coldly. "We must test how far her courage can go. A message must be sent, not just to her, but to those who listen to her." The other nodded. "Then let the trial begin." The next morning, the school assembly was unusually tense. Someone had written cruel words about Kavya on the notice board, mocking her speech, calling her a liar, calling her weak. The students gathered around, whispering, some laughing, some looking shocked. When Kavya arrived, all eyes turned to her. For a moment her heart sank, but then, slowly, she walked forward. She stood before the notice board, read every word, and then turned to face the crowd. Her voice was calm but firm. "These words are written to shame me. But I do not feel shame, because the truth I spoke was not for me. It was for all of us. If you believe kindness is weakness, then remember, weakness is when you hide behind insults, not when you stand with courage." The hall was silent. Some clapped softly, others simply looked away. But in the distance, hidden eyes watched. The men in the dark suits were satisfied. "She does not bend easily," one said. "But we will push harder. The real test is yet to come." Kavya returned home that evening tired but not broken. Sundar and Lakshmi listened as she told them what had happened. Sundar's hands clenched into fists. "This has gone too far," he muttered. Kavya looked at him gently. "Papa, let me carry this. If I run from trials now, I will never be ready for the future. Trust me." Lakshmi placed her hand on both of theirs. "We are with you, child. No matter how dark the storm, a family that stands together can never be broken." Yet even as they sat together, none of them knew that the storm was already moving closer, and the first real blow was about to strike. The storm's strikes days passed, but the tension around Kavya only grew. The whispers at school became louder, the mocking became sharper, and even on the streets near their home, strangers sometimes stared too long. Sundar's worry grew heavy, and Lakshmi often sat in silence, her thoughts restless. One evening, as Sundar returned home from work, he noticed a slip of paper on the front gate. The note was short but cruel. "Your daughter's courage will cost you peace." His chest tightened. He hid the note in his pocket before Kavya or Lakshmi could see it, but trouble could not be hidden for long. The very next day, when Kavya reached school, she found her desk covered with scribbles. Words like liar, attention seeker, and fake were scratched across it in dark ink. The students crowded around, waiting for her reaction. Some expected tears, some expected anger. Kavya stood still for a moment. Her hands trembled as she touched the desk. Then she picked up the duster, wiped the scribbles away slowly, and said, "You can write on my desk, but you cannot write inside my heart." A few students clapped softly, but most stayed silent. The boys who had mocked her earlier turned away, hiding their unease. That evening, Kavya came home quieter than usual. She did not eat much and sat alone in her room. Lakshmi entered with gentle steps. "Child, do not swallow your pain in silence. Share it." Kavya looked up, her eyes wet. "Nani, why do people hate voices that only ask for kindness? I never spoke to hurt anyone. I only spoke to remind them of respect. Why do they want to break me?" Lakshmi hugged her tightly. "Because truth shines like a mirror, and many cannot bear to see their reflection. But remember, a mirror that cracks still shows the truth. You are that mirror, child. Do not stop shining." As the night deepened, Sundar sat alone in his study again. The weight of being a father pressed heavily on him. He opened his laptop and began typing a speech of his own. He wanted to defend his daughter publicly, to protect her with his influence. But halfway through, he stopped. Kavya's words echoed in his mind. "Let me fight with my words. If I run away now, my voice will never matter again." He closed the laptop slowly, whispering to himself, "She must walk her path. But I will stand close, ready to catch her if she falls." But the storm was not just whispers and scribbles anymore. The men in dark suits had returned. They were not content with simple warnings. One of them spoke sharply. "The girl is still speaking. The people are still listening. It is time to strike harder." 2 days later, during a school debate competition, Kavya was invited to speak again. She stood at the stage, ready to present her thoughts. The hall was full, parents and students watching eagerly. But as she began, a voice interrupted from the crowd. "She should not be on stage. She only speaks for attention. She is a shame to her family." The voice was harsh, cruel, and filled with bitterness. Kavya froze for a second. Her eyes searched the crowd. It was not a student. It was a grown man sitting among the parents. Gasps filled the hall. The teachers tried to calm the crowd, but the words had already landed like stones. Kavya's lips trembled, but then she took a slow breath. She stepped closer to the microphone. Her voice shook at first, but then it grew steady. "You can insult me. You can question me. But do not call my voice a shame. Because every child has the right to speak, and every truth has the right to be heard. If I stand here today, it is not because I seek attention. It is because silence is heavier than insult. I would rather carry your words than carry regret for staying quiet." The hall erupted with claps louder than ever before. Many parents stood up, cheering her bravery. The man who had shouted grew red in the face and left quietly. But not everyone clapped. In the corner, one of the men in dark suits watched her closely. He pulled out his phone and sent a message. "She does not bend. Prepare the next move." Later that night, Sundar finally showed the warning notes to Lakshmi. Her face turned pale. "We cannot ignore this anymore," she whispered. But before they could decide what to do, Kavya entered the room. Her eyes were tired but full of determination. "Do not hide the danger from me," she said softly. "I know it is there, but if the storm wants to strike me, let it. I will not step back." Sundar's throat tightened. Lakshmi's eyes filled with tears. They both knew this was no longer just a child speaking. This was a spirit rising, unshaken even by storms. The night grew darker, and the family sat together in silence. They did not speak, but their hearts knew the truth. The storm was far from over. The real test had not yet arrived. The final test, the next week, began with silence. But it was the kind of silence that carries weight. Sundar felt it when he read the news. Lakshmi felt it when she stepped out to the market, and Kavya felt it when she walked to school. Eyes followed her everywhere. Whispers chased her steps, and the air was heavy with unseen tension. The men in dark suits had not disappeared. Their plan was in motion. One of them said coldly, "If fear cannot silence her, humiliation will." On Friday, the school organized a cultural event. The hall was decorated with bright colors, students rehearsed songs and plays, and parents filled the seats. Kavya was asked to share a short speech again. She agreed, though Sundar hesitated. Lakshmi held his hand and whispered, "Let her voice fly. Do not cage it." When Kavya walked onto the stage, the audience was restless. Some were eager, some doubtful, and a few carried cruel smiles. She stood at the microphone, her palms sweaty but her heart steady. As she began to speak, a loud sound suddenly interrupted her. The projector behind her lit up, showing distorted images with her face scribbled over with mocking words. Liar, weak, fake. Gasps filled the hall. Some students laughed nervously, some looked shocked. For a moment, Kavya froze. Her chest tightened. Her legs felt weak. The humiliation struck harder than any insult she had faced before. Sundar rose from his chair, furious, ready to stop it. But Lakshmi held his arm tightly. "Wait," she whispered, her eyes fixed on Kavya. The hall waited. Would she cry? Would she run? Kavya closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and then turned to face the screen. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the hall. "Yes, those are my pictures. Yes, those words are written for me. And maybe some of you believe them. But let me tell you something. I am not ashamed, because shame belongs to those who mock, not to those who speak. I am not weak, because weakness is hiding behind shadows, not standing in light. I am not fake, because truth does not need decoration. Truth simply needs courage." The hall went silent. No one moved. The projector flickered and went dark. Kavya stepped closer to the edge of the stage. Her voice grew stronger. "You can humiliate me. You can laugh at me. You can even try to break me. But you cannot take away what I believe. Respect is real. Kindness is powerful. Humility is strength. These are not just words for me. They are the way I will live. And if even one person in this hall carries these values forward, then every insult written against me is already defeated." Slowly, a clap broke the silence. It came from Lakshmi, then another from Sundar. Soon, the entire hall was clapping, louder and louder, until the sound shook the walls. People stood up, cheering, their faces shining with pride. The men in dark suits, watching from the back, exchanged looks of frustration. "She's not bending," one muttered. The other shook his head. "Then she is not our defeat. She is our lesson." They left quietly, their shadows disappearing into the night. After the event, students and parents surrounded Kavya. Many thanked her, some cried, and even those who had mocked her before now looked at her with respect. The principal announced on stage, This young girl has reminded us all of the true meaning of courage. Today, she has taught us more than any textbook could. Sundar walked to the stage, his eyes filled with pride. He hugged Kavya tightly. "You did not just speak, child. You shone." Lakshmi joined them, her hand resting on Kavya's head. "I always told you greatness is not in never falling. It is in rising after every fall. Tonight, you have risen higher than any insult could reach." Kavya smiled through her tears. Her heart felt light, not because the world had clapped for her, but because she had not let the storm break her. That night, as the family sat together, Sundar spoke softly. "Kavya, you have taught me something I had forgotten. Courage is not just for leaders, or adults, or those in power. Courage belongs to anyone who refuses to stay silent." Lakshmi nodded, her eyes shining. "And kindness is the crown of true courage." Kavya looked at them both. "Then let us live this way every day. Not just in speeches, not just on stages, but in the smallest acts. Because that is how change begins." The house was quiet, but it was no longer heavy. It was filled with peace, the kind that comes after a storm has passed. Outside, the night sky stretched wide, dotted with stars. Kavya looked up at it from her window and whispered to herself, "Let them test me again. I will not fall, because truth is not mine alone. It belongs to everyone who dares to believe in it." And with that, her journey of courage had only just begun.